I decided to make a video on carburetor teardowns to show exactly what needs to be taken apart for a rebuild and cleaning. So I'm starting out with a H1 500 carburetor. As you can see, this is the idle adjustment screw. You screw it out to raise the idle, you screw it in to lower the idle. It's connected to a rod that goes through the slide. To remove that, there's a little cotter pin which you remove, and then the rod will drop down inside the carburetor. Obviously it's already removed from the cable. And again, you screw it out to raise the idle, screw it in to lower the idle. I'm going to go ahead and disassemble it. I'll be pulling out the idle screw, and that's the idle spring. Next I'll remove the top. Pretty simple, just unscrews. Now there's a little keyway to keep everything aligned, and so, which is on the top. And this is a gasket to seal off the top of the carburetor so there won't be an air leak. These are kind of a pain because they like to fall off and get stuck in the spring. So I usually clean it, either use super glue or Gorilla Snot, whatever. I line everything up and I glue that back on, so therefore it's not going to lose its place and cause a leak, and it just makes assembly a whole lot easier. Obviously that's the slide spring. I'm removing the slide. This is the auto rod. Make sure it's straight. If it's bent, then sometimes the side will hang up and you won't get a proper idle, or you'll get a high idle. So you can just turn that to make sure that the rod is straight. If it's bent, obviously very carefully straighten it out. Next you have the slide. As you can see inside there, I just pushed out, I call it a little X clip because it looks like an X, kinda. This is your needle. You can barely see it, but the needle has 5 notches. The very top notch is number 1. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when we're talking about going rich or leaner, those are where the slots are. You raise the clip, which lowers the needle, which leans it out, or you lower the clip, which raises the needles, which richens it out. Now, this little X clip, once you install the throttle cable, it'll go in the large hole, and then you'll slide it over into the small hole. Now, what a lot of guys don't realize, as you see the small hole, don't realize that this X clip actually keeps the cable from slipping out. So once the cable's inside there and you push the clip down, you need to take a small screwdriver or whatever and move the clip over the large hole, and that way the cable can't come out. A lot of carburetor problems are trying to be traced when the only thing that really happened is the cable came out. So make sure you slide that clip over the large hole so the cable can't pull through the slide. Save you a lot of tuning headaches. This clip also holds the needle down, and that needs to be pushed out to remove the needle. Obviously that's the fuel spigot. Now it depends on the carb. Some of these holes are opened for airflow for fuel mixing, so make sure when you're cleaning carb, blow carburetor cleaner through them. You'll see which ones are open, and compress air to make once the carburetor's apart to make sure whatever passageways through there are open. And then start out to remove the float bowl. Sometimes the screws are tight, so you can tap on the screwdriver to loosen those up. The main thing is make sure the screwdriver actually fits the screws. and I do drop screwdrivers once in a while. So basically here I'm just removing the 4 screws. Like I said, it's good to make sure the screwdriver fits the slots very well, or you'll end up stripping the screws out or boogering them up so they just don't look good. So just be careful there. And sometimes you have to tap the float bowl to get it loose. Just tap it with the end of the screwdriver. I didn't have to. Now you can see the pipe standing up. That's the overflow pipe. Now some guys have trouble with fuel leakage, and sometimes, as you can see, this pipe came right out, so it's loose. Sometimes they'll vibrate loose just because they're old. Sometimes they'll crack and you get a fuel leak and you just can't find it. So if you do have a fuel leak out of the carb, make sure that's not loose or cracked. If it is, you can JB weld it after you clean everything, and check for cracks. If it's cracked, then you'll need to find a new tube. So that's a float bowl. Next we get the pin, the pivot pin for the float. They just pushes out either way. You can pop that out. And obviously the float, shake the float to make sure there's no fluid in it. Sometimes they do get holes in them and fill with fluid, and then that's going to throw off your fuel and cause carb overflow. So make sure there's no fluid inside the floats. If there is, sometimes you can solder to fix it. Most of the times you can't, so you'll need find a new used float. Here's the fuel cutoff valve. Fuel valve I call it, which it should be nice and loose in there. With a carburetor kit you'll get a new valve. As you can see, this screwdriver is ground up. I take a cheap screwdriver and I take a pilot jet and I grind it to fit the exact length and width of the slot, because these are brass, and if you strip it, you're going to be in a world of hurt. So make sure it fits in there very tight. Modify a cheap screwdriver, fit in tight. Sometimes it's good to tap it before you try to bring it out, or unscrew it just a couple of times to loosen it up. And if it fits well, usually the pilot jet will just unscrew. And there's the pilot jet. Now it's hard to see on the video, but all pilot jets have very small holes in the sides. Those get clogged up. They need to be cleaned, as this right through the center of the jet there's a very, very small hole. Sometimes they do mechanically need to be cleaned if they don't clean up with the soaking. So I like to strip a piece of wire out of just a regular wire, one strand, and run it through the holes. It's soft and it's not going to make the holes any bigger, especially the pilot jet hole. And it's always good to write down the numbers somewhere for your jet, and for your both jets, or all your information put on the side of the carb.